to call the meeting to order. This is the School District of Waukesha Finance and Facilities Committee meeting for May 9th, 2022. And thank you for those showing up on this wonderful day. It's so nice outside, we should probably hold this outside. Can we figure that out? Have we been properly posted?
Yes, we have.
Thank you. I'd like to welcome Carrie and Kelly to our Finance and Facilities Committee. We have a lot in store for you all year long. We're at the time where we have our citizens address the committee, an opportunity to address the committee. Tonight we do have one person signed up, and because there are less than 6 speakers, we allow up to 5 minutes for the comments, and at the 3-minute mark you'll get a notification. We expect all speakers to honor our time limit, refrain from using any inappropriate language, and be respectful in their comments. Speakers who do not meet these expectations may be prohibited from speaking at future board and committee meetings. Speakers are here to address the board, not the audience, the school board, and the school committee. It does not endorse any comments made by any members of the community here tonight. We would like to remind our community members of the impact of their words on others, and that our children are watching. We commit to communicating with you in a respectful and productive ways, and ask that you do the same. We also expect that the audience will be respectful of the speaker and the board and refrain from responding with verbal comments, cheering, applause, or other behavior that will detract from the meeting. Please note that no obstructions can be created between the board and the audience. Visual aids cannot be used, and the area behind the speaker and podium will be clear during public comment. Also, in order to respect our speakers and meeting participants, please silence your phones at this time if you haven't done so. And we do have one speaker tonight, and that's Paul Reese. Welcome, Paul.
Good evening. I'm a strong believer that life can always get worse, but sometimes it just doesn't get much better than this. This is what the silent majority looks like, and I hope you have a mandate, and I hope you use it. I want to address raises. They're talking about 7-8%. I want to remind everybody that this inflation is transitory, and why have a permanent solution for a temporary problem? The smarter people than I have told me this, and so then I'm going with it's transitory, and 1.5–2% is fine by me. I do think our teachers' aides have been underpaid for quite some time. I also want to talk about a little bit how to save money, where money comes from and where it's wasted in this town. And this goes against the WIAA, and what they're going to have a problem with is we have 3 pools we pay for, and they're expensive. And one is the pride of the state. It's one of the best pools in the state of Wisconsin. And the other 2 are okay, and one was built in the 90s. It's a nice pool, and one was in the 70s. And maintenance for this, we're about to talk tonight about maintenance on a tennis court is $435,000. Maintenance on a pool is quite a bit. We just did a bunch on North, so you all know about that. But North or South we did the maintenance on. North's pool is meters, and it is a useless pool as far as holding any events. I think there's like 10 pools that are meters in the state of Wisconsin. It has no purpose, and we're allowed to team up with other schools for South. McGuanago swims with South's team, and I think Catholic Memorial at least practices at West, if not swims with West team. So those things are allowed, and but the WIA won't let us close North down to combine with West, and it really should be done because it's a big expense, and just because Arrowhead doesn't like the idea doesn't mean it shouldn't be done. They're a very expensive thing for us to maintain and take care of, and you look at the price of what the tennis court is. In a swimming pool, you have heating and air. You have to heat that. It's got to be climate controlled. They're expensive to run. And North is useless. It really isn't. You run tournaments, you can't do anything there because it's meters, and nothing swims meters, in this state. So anyways, it's a big expense, and it's something the board could look at if it really is serious about saving some money and dig into and find out, can the WIA be persuaded to let us close that pool down and save a lot of money in doing so. So this district has a lot of expenses that some don't. So anyways, thanks.
Thank you, Paul. Moving on to our action items, we have approval of minutes from April 1st, 2022. I'd be looking for a motion on that.
So moved.
Moved by Mr. McCaffrey. Is there a second?
Second.
Seconded by Ms. Ranichek. Any questions, comments, corrections? Okay, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Anyone wanting to abstain? Okay. 5-0 passes. Moving on to our vouchers. I know we have at least a few questions, Sherry, and I appreciate you digging into those.
No problem. I appreciate getting them before I left, so thank you. There were 3 questions on vouchers this month. First one is for voucher number 347182 for J.H. Findorf and Sons for $29,967. And the question was, is this coming out of the sinking fund for Swim Express? And what is the status of the sinking fund? How much is added to it each year? This particular expense, while it was for the pool, did not come out of the sinking fund because it was more of a building type repair, and it came out of our capital projects fund, not the sinking fund. I attached a history on the back of the documents that I handed out. There's a history of our sinking fund and shows what, how much has been added each year, and what the total is as of last Thursday was $82,102.74. So it's not a huge amount of money, and they do use some of it for different projects, but this was something when the pool flooded, they noticed, or the inspection uncovered an issue that had to be taken care of that was more building related than it was pool related.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Okay.
Thank you on that.
No problem. Voucher number 347375 and 347376 for Salamone Supplies, totaling $30,835. Question was, what type of supplies is this for? Is it a blanket PO? And if so, how do we assure it's being used? These particular supplies were cases of garbage can liners, foam hand soap, and 800-foot roll towels. They were not blanket POs. They were specific to these purchases. And so these purchases come in and they go into our warehouse supply, which is at the service building. And then as schools need the supplies, they put in a requisition request. We use School Dude to manage the warehouse, and then it's sent to the schools, and at the end of the month, it's deducted from the school's expenditures and taken out of inventory. So the business office works with, we have a warehouse manager, Simon, who handles that, and the business office works on making the journal entry happen to expense it out to the schools. And then we do periodic reviews of the warehouse inventory to make sure it matches what's in School Dude. And the last we did was last June, I believe it was, that we went out there and took our inventory sheets with us and said, show me this, and went over and counted the number and made sure they matched. So the inventory matched when we did the last review.
Right.
And as far as the question, though, about assuring how that it's being used, it's mainly the inventory system that's managing the purchasing.
Right.
So it's everything that's in the warehouse is in the system, and it's got capabilities to show when you're running low on things.
Any other questions or comments on this? Yeah, Kelly.
Thank you. I appreciate the explanation. And just a clarifying question, are there any limits to what, like the quantity or value of inventory we can hold on supplies?
Right now, we don't have anything like that. We allow the warehouse manager to manage that process and determine when things are needed. And again, a lot of it is utilized, the system that we use, the School Dude management, helps to manage that by looking at the flow of things coming and going.
Any other
Also,
questions?
our preventative maintenance schedules, like if it's HVAC filters, there's a schedule, so they know how many they need and look to history to follow that, so that's the targets they have.
Any other questions or comments on this topic? Okay, Sherry?
Okay, the last question was for voucher 347, 469, Richardson Schools for $15,480. So the question was, remind me if this is for a month, a semester, or annual total for the services provided by Richardson. Are we still within our projected budget for services from Richardson? This invoice is a monthly tuition, but it's specific to 5 students that fall under a category called high-cost students. And their special education tuition is higher than the average special education tuition, and we're eligible for additional reimbursement on those students. And it's called the high-cost claim that we do once a year. Excuse me. And so we invoice these students out separately because most of our tuition we pay for with our flow-through grant, but if we pay for these students with our flow-through grant, we can't get the high-cost claim on it. So we, in trying to maximize our reimbursements from special education that we can get from the state, these 5 students are pulled out separate. But overall, we pay an average of $175,000 a month to Richardson. So I just wanted to make sure that people realize that $15,000 was just one small subset of students. Overall, we're anticipated on our special education tuition to come in within budget.
Okay.
We actually get a discounted rate on services provided by Richardson. We have a tuition agreement. It's part of, it's not built into the lease agreement on the building, but it's a parallel conversation we have when we're talking about a new lease. So you know, it is a discounted rate.
Is it 10%, I think?
That's the number I have in my head, but,
10 or 15,
Yes.
I don't recall, but.
and we just renewed it not too long ago, but we can bring that back, or I'll send it out in the Friday.
Yeah, just in the update, I think
Yep.
would be fine.
And I'd like to clarify my last statement. We're actually are a little over on tuition, but we also are getting more special education aid than we expected, so overall, it washed out. But we are a little ahead on the tuition above budget. It's one of those things that's kind of hard to budget.
So will we see an amendment on that
Yes,
next month?
next month, we're
Okay.
coming back with, it should be quite a few amendments, actually, but yes.
All right. Fair enough. Anyone else on this topic? Any other questions on the vouchers? Okay, I'd be looking for a motion
So moved,
to approve them as presented.
as presented.
Okay. Is there a second? Dr. Piasek? Any further discussion? Okay, all in favor, say aye. Aye. All opposed? Passes 5-0. Thank you, Sherry. Appreciate you digging into those. Next action item, we have approval of our 2022-2023 student fees by policy. We are required to look at our student fees and approve those for the upcoming year. Darren, are you going to introduce us to what changes, if any, that we're looking at?
Actually, very, very few changes as presented. None of the registration fees have changed from the prior year, and actually, there's a history also attached in board docs if you want to see the biggest change we made recently was the elimination of course fees, and that was over 2 years between 2017 and 19. The food service.
Oh,
fee-
Darren, I think you need to turn,
Sorry.
you might want to repeat a little bit of that.
Registration fees are not being recommended to change. The last big change we had with course was elimination of course fees that was about 3 or 4 years ago. The daily food service fees, that's going to be determined based on our contractual situation with our next provider. So we just left that blank. And then the miscellaneous fees, the athletic fee did not change. Student parking is not changing. Pay to ride, this will be us affirming the changes we talked about in the merger of Hadfield and Whittier. And really, it was quite a bit to do with the proration based on free and reduced lunch for pay-to-ride students. So that's making that change. And then this isn't much of an issue anymore. Return check fees, $15, but so much of it's electronic now that it's hardly ever used. So, though, again, no changes to the course fees. We approve them now the policy is a factor, but also registration materials are going out to parents and things like that. So we'd like to get these numbers in place, and then we can upload it into campus, into their student accounts for payment. So any questions on the fees?
Dr. Piasek?
Thank you. Can you just remind me, Darren, what the discounted rates were then for free and reduced lunch for transportation?
Do you have that from Pay to Ride? With the,
It was 130, wasn't it?
I think it was having it and then,
It's half.
yeah.
Correct. It's, yes, it is 130 per year and then $65 per year for free.
For free and reduced.
For those who qualify for,
130
For
is
free.
for, yes, 130 is for reduced, 65 is for free.
let me just clarify that. So then half of that rate is then each additional family member.
Yeah, then the additional kids was $65 as well. It used to be one, well, if they went to the same school, it was one thing, and if it went to two different schools, but now it was the second child or whatever was $65.
Regardless of the building. And then if they qualify for free lunch, it's half of that 65.
That's the, do you remember what free was?
The additional student to any site is $65 for free or reduced.
Okay. That makes more sense.
We are lowering the fees, is really what.
Yeah, we're increasing access to this.
Thank you.
And that was actually based around some parent input that we've collected throughout the year. Any other questions or comments on the fee schedule?
The only thing that I've mentioned on a few occasions, and again, I don't know if this is great thinking or not, is charging a fee at the pre-K and 5K level. Part of me thinks once you get parents to come to our schools and their children are here, you're getting, they stay with us, right, for the long haul? And is there enough of incentive to waive that fee for the registration? But that's just food for thought. I can't tell you exactly. I can.
Not for this time around, but in the
Well,
future?
Depends on whether you field that question or action tonight or not, but it's something that I think,
From an administrative recommendation, it is not a recommendation, it's just food for thought, is how you
it's an idea I
present it?
have.
Okay,
I don't think we've talked about it administratively. I don't have to speak for the cabinet, but it's just an idea I've had. For example, the 4K registration fee, we gather or collect $12,000 to $14,000 a year. If we get two kids to stay with us for 12 years because it was free, that's roughly $10,000 per kid every year. I don't know if that's great marketing or not, but just something, and if it ends up being the next go-around for this, I'm fine with that as well.
fair enough. Yeah, Mrs. Kozlowski.
So the student fees in general has been a topic of not just this community, but I think a lot of communities, just the fees and understanding
Come a little closer.
how are we tracking the fees, right? What are we using the funds for? How are we managing that? As a parent, I'm looking at it that I'm already a taxpayer. There's taxpayer dollars that we are using, dividing, and pushing forward to it. So when you take a look at some of the kids, and I've had kids with, we've reduced the AP classes, but the question I'm really driving at is, what are we doing with the fees that we get for the registration? And I will then add on, what are we doing for, like, the parking fees, $100 a semester for parking?
Sure, the registry, well, there's another fee out there too, the tech fee that's listed that every student gets. So that really goes to, and I think that might have been added during the rollout of one-to-one technology, I'm thinking, but correct me if I'm wrong.
Yeah.
So that's part of the apps and the access to materials, and really the registration fees is a similar, it goes into mainly funding consumables in the classroom. The parking fee serves several purposes in my mind. You have the maintenance of the parking lots themselves. I also think it provides, especially for schools that have parking issues, not everyone is just driving their car to school every day. There's some skin in the game, I guess, if you want to bring a vehicle. The high schools also use, because you sign up your vehicle, so we have vehicle information, so there's a data collection part of it as well. But the dollars themselves go into funding our asphalt program, which varies in costs every year. Sometimes we just did South. Other years it might be 4 little four small schools, so it varies, but that's the general answer I give.
Dr. Pasek.
Thank you. I'll just follow up on Mrs. Kozlowski's comments about parking, because that's something I think just hearing conversations with teenagers, it might actually earn them credits for personal financial planning when I hear the teenagers talking about how they're managing their parking passes and maybe sometimes gaming the system a little bit. I do think that there's some inconsistency between the 3 schools and how we do it. And some lots aren't full because I think there's fees associated with them. Some have assigned spots. Obviously, it depends on what's happening at that school. But it also generates quite a bit of relevant revenue that I think goes back into appropriate programs. But that might be something. And I'm also not proposing a modification for this year's fee schedule. But I would like to maybe spend a little bit more time in anticipation of this decision in the future, talking about how we could maybe balance these fees a little bit, especially the parking one, which just be something for future consideration.
And one of the things that we've done in the past, I don't think we had this in our packet, is how do we compare to other school districts? Do we have that in here?
We didn't add it. I don't know if they did it during COVID. It kind of got lost in the wake. But we could.
There's a full analysis that has been done, and it's published. I'm happy to pull it up and share it. I looked at it about a month and a half ago, taking a look at all of the different schools that have it. And I will say that Waukesha is on the very low end of what we are assessing for fees compared to area districts on that, so that is a benefit. But it is something, when I take a look at what we are charging and where we're doing is how are we managing it? Are we looking at it? If it's going into a fund, I want to be able to understand what's that balance, how are we using it for that, and making it sure just so that even as a board member taxpayer, I have further validation that we're wise with what we're collecting.
Yeah, and with respect to collecting data on other districts, what we've seen in the past is for all the fees. So, we might be high in one area and low in another, and it's kind of good to have that big picture of all the fees. And that just helps us to be able to frame things a little bit better with our local school districts around us, so.
Hamilton used to administer that survey that we would use, Hamilton School District, and I think we were towards the lower, we weren't the bottom. But one other thing, when you look at those surveys, that when you're comparing us, is those surveys don't list all the course fees. The laundry list that we used to charge won't be captured, because now that's a zero for us. I don't think, maybe first aid or the swim thing where you get the license, you still have to pay. That's about the only thing. So when you look at those surveys, make sure you factor in course fees, because course fees at the high school levels can ramp up very quickly. But I do think overall that we're at the lower, I don't know, third or whatever, but I'm all for, just like the course fees, to me, you're increasing access by not having those fees in place where any student can take any course. So we can bring back any report you want. We don't do like a sinking fund tracking of it, but we can look at how we account for it as well. We're open to whatever.
All right. Any other questions or comments on the fee schedule presented? I'd be looking for a motion.
So moved.
to do them as presented?
Yes, please.
Okay. Is there a second? Second by Ms. Kozlowski. Further discussion? All in favor, say aye. Aye. All opposed? 5-0, Darren? Moving on to our discussion and information items, we do have 4 of those this evening, and we're going to start by talking about the Lowell Park tennis courts. Darren, are you going to kick this off?
Yes, if Ron Grawl from Park and Rec is here and Brian Schley is here from North, if you guys want to come up. Jess, can you get your mic over?
Welcome, Ron. Welcome, Brian.
So,
Thanks for being here.
Ron and I have
Thanks
been in
for having us.
conversation about, well, Brian and I have been in conversations about the tennis courts at North for a few years now, right? But Ron and I were in a meeting and we started talking about the tennis courts and the cities. And for those of you who don't know, that's city tennis courts, city property, and we access them through a permitting process. So we started talking about the need to upgrade them and possibly sharing. And we have, Park and Rec and the district have shared on projects before costs. So this isn't the first time, but we've got a cost estimate that the city has secured to replace the 8 courts that are in, I'll call them the north tennis courts, even though it's Lowell Park, just so everyone's on the same page here. And the cost, obviously, for doing tennis courts is not too cheap. So the estimated cost that the city has provided is $558,000. They're recommending a 50-50 split, but not counting the LED lighting system, which the Park and Rec Department would cover the complete cost for. So attached to in board docs is the permits for a spring and fall season, where you can see the utilization by the North teams, the price quote, and the recommendation or the request that the district go in half and half with Park and Rec. And this work would be completed in the summer of 2023 because the city's on a calendar year budget process and we're on a fiscal year, July to June. So the first time they could add it to their CIP list would be the summer of '23. So I've asked Brian here from the district and North aspect and Ron from the Park and Rec viewpoint, and then we can answer any financial questions, but we recommend that we partner with Park and Rec to renovate those courts. There's also some pictures there attached in board docs as well. If you want to take a look at the condition, it's definitely time if you've been out there. So we're here to answer any questions, or if we have process questions or how the bid was developed or anything like that, we're here to help foster a conversation.
Mrs. Kozlowski.
All right, so a couple things. We just, I think 2 years ago, redid the Waukesha West tennis courts.
Mm-hmm.
Do we have a cost of that?
I can get that. I believe it was about $350,000, but
And how many courts?
8?
So roughly equivalent,
Mhm.
right? When we're talking about a shared partnership, the question that I have is utilization, right? So when we're dealing with the high school students, they're going to be supervised. It's a scheduled permitted time. For the public, it's, my mom is going to go play pickleball there, right? They're just free, open to the public. Is that fair to say?
No, actually, pickleball is highly competitive for spots, and there are fees associated with pickleball.
Well, and it, just in general reference, though, it's open to the
Oh,
public.
yeah, and when they're not reserved, they're certainly open for the public, and we have dedicated pickleball courts now over at Lowell. So our intent is to really look at this as a tennis facility. I won't get into any, more of the questions than I need to as far as, getting maybe off track, but
Yeah,
I'll address the
I'm more
questions.
concerned about the spend and then the wear and tear, right? So when we did the Waukesha West, it's dedicated to the Waukesha West students, the schools that are using it. So when you do a shared thing with the city, now the investment becomes our funds and the public's, and how do we manage maintenance on that, because this is the one-time thing to get it done. And I looked at the pictures, I mean, they're horrible. It needs to get fixed. I'm just trying to dedicate where our resources should be going when we're talking about access for the school district versus how are we allocating this, and that we've now got a shared risk with public, further damage, maintenance costs, and how that would look going forward.
In terms of comparing the two projects, and I know you know this, but for people who are watching, one key difference is West has the space, they have their own courts, and North really has no option to have courts on their campus, at least any of them that I would recommend. Being so, the dynamics are slightly different. In terms of the utilization, you are adding that community usage, but I also, in talking with Ron and a few other people, if they were to move ahead with renovating these courts themselves, they likely wouldn't put 8 courts there. If you eliminate North's usage from there, the project scope wouldn't be this large, or it would be pickleball. So that's a different dynamic as well. We've also had conversations about Lowell's play structure, which is butts up to the Park and Rec's voice interest in helping us fund that playground equipment. So I'm not saying this nets out to maybe where you're looking for it to be, but just a little background as to, but the maintenance and everything, we're out of, the district doesn't maintain the courts to, I can't go in there and crack seal one day or anything like that, is the arrangement. So that's all on them.
Yeah, correct. I can give you a brief rundown of the history a little bit, and in particular with the maintenance. The city's been 100% as far as the maintenance over the life of the courts. They were constructed in 1979, so we've gotten some really nice mileage. It's been the home for North High School since North High School became a reality, I believe in the early 80s, somewhere in that.
Mid-'70s.
Mid-'70s, I'm sorry. Yeah. Well, even better yet.
75?
As far as the usage goes, primary users is the school district, and we do not charge for use of the courts. We have that reciprocal relationship with facilities that's been in place for a long, long time. We intend to try to keep that in place, so that's another factor to consider. So the maintenance, we do have usually 5 to 8 years. We look at crack filling, resurfacing. When we say resurfacing, it's basically a coat that's put on top, or acrylic coat, and then it's repainted. And once you have a new facility, you generally are not looking at doing that kind of work for a good chunk of time. Usually the first 10, maybe 15 years you can get away before you start seeing the cracking. And that's why our cost in the West, I'd be careful to look at comparisons, because it's 2 different sites, and the soils are different and the locations are different. Lowell's notorious, poor subsoils, and this would include really doing the work on the subsurface as well as on the surface. It's a total reconstruction. And again, we've had 44 years of use of the courts. So that's really important. What you put underneath is going to really drive how well that facility is going to last for well beyond our 10 years, is our hope. So the subsurface, new drain tiling, that does add some additional cost when it comes to Lowell. Again, as Darren mentioned, the lighting, that's more of a community use factor. The district really has not a need for lighting, but it's certainly there in case, Brian has need for it. But that's something that we would fund solely as a city portion. And that's not included in this price, so it's significant. The lighting, it's anywhere from $270,000 to $300,000 to do the relighting. But again, it's all outdated. We're looking at LED lighting, which is in the long haul far more cost effective. And I know the district's very aware of how well LED works. Our use is primarily in the summer. We run our summer tennis programs. We do have occasional smaller tournaments that are run there. Higher Park is really our premier tennis facility. So really tennis-wise, we're in very good shape overall in our system. And we actually are reducing the number of tennis courts where it makes sense. The latest example would be at Buckner Park. We had 6 courts there. We reduced it to 4 and converted 2 to pickleball. Everyone seems to be extremely happy about that so far. So, no, we're pleased in how that's turned out. So we're trying to be obviously responsive to the community and the needs that we're hearing about and actually assessing in more formal ways through evaluation. And pickleball is on the rise. Tennis is, I'll say, it has leveled. It really hit its peaks in the 70s and 80s. It was kind of the prime time for tennis, and then it's leveled off. Nothing against tennis, but we do have very nice facilities in place for tennis. And Darren's right. From the city perspective and from a community use perspective, we probably don't need 8 courts over at Lowell for community use. 4 would probably be fine. 6 probably the maximum, but 8 is really truly accommodating competitive varsity level athletics. And that's my understanding. You need 8 courts to do a proper high school match. So we definitely want to do that.
I see Coach agreeing.
Your minimum is 7.
So we get 1 bonus court. And, again, as Darren indicated, we've been talking about this for a while. We haven't done a partnership project for some time. I just want to put it out there. We're very open and interested to work with the school district as much as possible on capital projects. I think that's the best way to really get the most bang for the taxpayer dollars on when we have facilities that kind of cross over. And if you think about it, there's quite a bit that come into play. Ball fields is another one, but we've done parking lots. I think our last real cost share project was at Lowell, and then over at Saratoga, we cost shared in some parking lots. Not real glamorous, but very needed. And so this is an excellent project that we hope that you can endorse. Timetable for us, our CIP process, July 1 is where we really need to have some formal commitment as far as funding sources. That's when we submit our capital improvement program for the first round of review. And then that process continues on through our finance committee. That generally happens in August. And then the Common Council makes some decisions, typically mid-September to early October. And so we would have a firm answer on approved project or not by that time frame.
So the expectation then for our district would be that these wouldn't even be available until at a minimum the fall of '23.
That's correct. As far as construction timeline, as you know, the wonderful spring weather that we have, we fairly, we kind of discount getting much done in the spring. Realistically, if we can break ground, do our demolition, there's some flexibility with demolition, but we also want to be aware of our other programs that we have going on there and also school use. But that's the first phase, is the demo of the old site. That's going to, there's some effort with that. So approximately May of 2023, and completion October, November of the fall. So in talking with Brian, as far as anticipating in advance, there would be a need to relocate, the tennis programs for 23. Our recommendation, and again, we've got a variety of courts, but the obvious spot to us would be Higher. We have 18 courts at Higher, and we are able to accommodate already South plays there and CMH. So, and we could accommodate another user, another school user if needed.
Okay, thank you.
Brian, have we ever had an issue from a,
I have a question.
Go ahead,
How
Mr.
much,
McCaffrey.
how much were the courts at Higher? Because you just did 4. What was the cost on that? Because those are total rebuilds as well.
Yeah, we did 4. And I want to say that was over 200,000 for those 4.
Okay.
And that also had some subsurface issues.
I
Again,
know you raised the courts about 3 feet.
Right,
Um,
correct.
Okay. So you're looking at losing tennis season on those courts for quite a bit.
Our current,
It's like a classic 8 thing right now, isn't it?
yeah, Kettle
Yeah.
Moraine just went through some construction with theirs. The reality for us is we're looking at injuries and other issues.
Oh, for
and we're
sure.
playing
I've
on
swept
that
those
surface
courts
right now,
for
so
hours.
we don't have another option at this
Right.
point. So.
Dr. Piasek?
Yeah, thank you. I have played on those courts for several years, and I've attended meets there, and so I think there's the other component that we as a district are hosting other schools on those courts. We're grateful to have access to them. I would also say probably the majority of community who are using those courts are district residents, so more than likely that's, coming back to them. And they've been in need of repair for probably 10 years or longer, so. I think the cost, and I apologize, I had to step out, but the fence in particular seems like that adds cost as well as the lighting.
Yeah, that base figure includes, the base figure is about $435,000. Again, that's an estimate. And that includes the fencing. So there's a significant amount of fencing.
Yeah.
And then you have the asphalt work. And then the other cost is, again, the subsurface work. We're looking at upgrading the subsurface and also adding new drain tile to it.
How would the lighting be handled? Because I've been there when the lights go out and it's dark. Is there
I
secondary?
used to have to put a quarter in the ones at
Yeah.
Buckner.
Yeah,
Yeah.
Any longer.
Yeah, we've pretty much given up on the quarters. Not worth,
Nobody
we
has
spent more money on repairing the machines than the money we brought in. That's a great question. We haven't quite determined, obviously, the technology is much better than the old system, and then that is an old system there, again, 1970s, when that was put in. So it would be more comparable, what we're putting, we just put new lights in over at Buckner, so it'd be the same system, Musco lighting, and you can use it on demand, but then at a preset time, 10 PM, you won't be able to turn them on. So we've gone to that, less maintenance, people like it, and, what revenue maybe we brought in on lighting, we were spending more on repairs, and long story short, it's a lot easier system. And again, it will be LED.
thank you.
Are there any other options besides hire? Brian, I mean, that's going to be a little bit of logistics, not necessarily for you, but your successor, right?
There really isn't. We could have some flexibility in August with the girls' program to share, potentially at Waukesha West High School. But once we get to the school year without lights at higher, or at Waukesha West, trying to get there later would be difficult depending on end of the day. So, and we, depending on the size of our team, our largest participation is in the fall, which again, you get a good chunk of the season in August. But we have 30 to 40 girls that play tennis. So we, even with that option, we may look at going to both sites just to get some practice time in or different things like that, or
Okay.
split matches, depending.
With respect to scheduling in the past, have you ever had any issues at all? Or is it pretty much you guys give the school district first dibs?
I think, well, we've had a good relationship in terms of no cost, and I would say the only challenge, and it's not insurmountable, we request all of our facilities for the entire year in advance. And we do have the flexibility to adjust our permit, but we are limited right now, and I guess one ask, and this is selfish of North, is right now we're limited to reserving courts 1 through 7. And if we were to make a contribution, it would be a lot easier. Instead of, if you look at our request, you see court 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 repeated daily through the request. If we could just blanket request courts 1 through 8 and have priority during that time, I think that would just really simplify our process.
Is that something that needs to be written into the contract then, as just an extra item for an ask?
Well, we don't have a formal agreement.
Right.
to start with. And then our process, we call it allocation process. And we get together with all the ADs and all the different user groups within the community for all the different facilities. That generally takes place in October, and we talk about the upcoming year. The school district is a priority user after city programming, and again, in the fall, in the spring, that priority is given to the school district.
Because you're
So-
focused on summer, as you had
Correct.
mentioned, right?
And that's been in place for a long, long time. And we don't, so I think that's the primary concern. I guess I'm not aware of that. You can't book the 8 courts, but I don't.
There's a new
you know.
stipulation put in this last year.
Okay. Yeah, it's probably for community use again. They have 1 court available at least for the community to use. That certainly can be worked out, I feel, administratively. But that's totally your prerogative, obviously, if you want to have some stipulation on how that's scheduled.
I just figured this might be my one opportunity to ask for it. So. I know that's getting into the weeds a little bit, but
I'm glad you took advantage of that opportunity, Brian. You should, right? And one other thing, Ron, it's on parkland, right? So you guys mow all the grass around it.
Correct. Yeah, the maintenance is 100%, with the city, and so that wouldn't change.
Okay. So from a time frame perspective, we would be, if you, do you need a formal agreement with us to have it added to your capital improvements project agenda, or would it be something that actually takes place from a formal agreement in September or October once the city council votes on it, or what do you envision that being?
Yeah, the terminology that we use with other, let's say Carroll University is a good example of a recent, significant partnership, is a formal commitment, however that may be, coming from the district. So a letter indicating that the district would be committed to the funding, the cost sharing, would do the job for us going into that July 1 deadline. So we would need a firm, we call it a formal commitment, something that's acted upon by the proper committee and by the school board.
Okay. And Darren can work with you to make sure we have all the components that you guys require?
Absolutely.
Okay.
can I ask one question about the planning? And this is again a selfish, might be the only time I get to ask, but when you're talking about construction and things that would cost maybe a lot more after the fact, I would just ask for some consideration for storage on the site, because I know we share the shelter storage, but with Jamboree and different events that take place, there's a lot of shuffling in and out with WTA, and then whose stuff is this and whose card is that, and then if there was an opportunity to build a small pad and a storage on site against the tennis courts, it might be just the time to think about it while all that construction is happening at a better cost than. I understand the scope of the project and the large cost, and I know that decisions have to be made, but I just would.
That would help from an efficiency perspective. Yeah.
Just a question or suggestion to consider.
Yeah, we've done a storage pad, for example, at Pebble Valley Baseball Field, and I believe the students from the district that put together the structure, and so that was kind of a neat thing. So we're certainly open to it, and we have some space, and the time to do it would be during construction, and maybe we'll get lucky and costs are less than we were hoping.
I think students up at South built a similar kind of storage facility by the band area. I think that was all done by students. But community service projects abound.
I'll stop trying to add cost to the project at this point.
I think that's why Darren invited you, Brian, right? Any other questions, thoughts, concerns? Would we be coming back with a commitment letter next month?
Yeah, I'm picturing an action item in June. That way we meet Park and Rec's timeline.
Okay. Well, thank you for your partnerships over the years. Bring that back to your colleagues. There's a number of them that we've had, and it takes time to work them out, and we all try to be fair and try and help out the community as a whole. So, and that's what we're trying to do here. So, thank you for being here tonight.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks for having me, and thanks for your consideration.
Thank you.
Have a good night, guys.
Thanks.
All right, moving on to our monthly budget report. Where do we stand, Sherry?
We're in good position. We had hoped to come back this month with budget revisions, but we just keep getting more and more information on different funding and things, so we're going to put together a comprehensive package for next month that'll include changes to revenues and changes to expenses, so that'll be at the June meeting. But as far as our overall budget report, our revenues are good. Our local sources this month, the largest amount we received was for our lottery tax credits. That was $6.1 million. That also included the City of Waukesha normal April tax statement. We've collected 81.8% of our taxes, with another $16 million to collect, and the majority of that will come in August. We'll have the City of Waukesha pays us monthly, so we'll have some City of Waukesha payments, but then all the remaining balance will be in August. Inter-district payments, we received $28,000 in eAchieve part-time non-open enrollment tuition. I'm sorry, that was inter-district sources. And then intermediate sources received a payment from CISA for our Carl Perkins grant totaling $27,065. State sources, our only state payment in April was our Common School Library Fund, and that was for $634,730. Federal sources, we had several payments, all grant payments. We had $3,300 in the ARPA, which is one of the COVID bills. Homeless grant, we had $17,900 in Title II, $13,500 in Title III, a little over $1,000 in Title IV, and then just a small amount of $853 in the ESSER 1 and $2,900 in ESSER 2. With ESSER 1, I think we've discussed this already, but we have spent the total district amount. We just have a very small amount left in ESSER 1. That's the private school participation amount. So we're trying to get them to spend that down, but we have spent all of our ESSER 1 money, and we're just starting to spend ESSER 2 based on the plan that the board has been working on every month. So we'll start seeing more claims and grant payments for that. Other revenues, we had a claim payment from EMC for $21,000. That's our insurance provider. Right now we've received 70% of our budgeted revenues compared to 66% last year at the same time. Expenditures, same thing every month. Salaries and benefits are one of our biggest spends, and right now every month we do our salary projections, and we have enough budget sufficient to cover all of the salary and benefit expenditures for the year. Purchase services, our main areas were for personal services, utilities, and tuition. Overall, the spending is where we expect it to be at 50.77% compared to 43.69% last year, but that's always in the timing of the different projects, so that's why it's a little higher this year. And for the personal services, under that, it was no big major purchases. It was a lot of small things that added up for that. Non-capital objects, we spent $272,000 in non-caps in April, and the largest of that was for a Milwaukee PC, $80,000, which is our provider for the eAchieve student computers. We spent 64% of that budget compared to 65% last year. Capital objects, there were several capital purchases in April, including $23,590 for a 50% deposit on the Chroma Cove system for the planetarium, and then $8,400 for an update to the Bethesda gym audio system, and $42,000 for ClassLink site licenses. In addition, we had credits in there, and that credits were from the Bethesda PTO because they contributed $16,000 to the gym upgrades, and $17,750 for items sold via the Wisconsin surplus auction site. That's the service building, when they come across things that are no longer functional for the district, they use that site to sell, unused items for the district. Insurance and judgments, minor activity, just really a vehicle addition, and then some more expenditures for the South Pool claim. Overall, the spend looks high, but that's skewed because of the South Pool, and we talked about that a little bit last month. But when we have a claim, for a big event, the expenditures go into this category, but then we also have the revenues coming in on, I'm sorry, this is the revenue, no, this is the expense side, but then we have on the revenue side, the claim money going in. So it's more of a wash, but it always makes this category look overspent. No transfers this month, minimal spending on other objects, mainly continued dues is about all we pay out of that, dues and fees. Overall, we're at 57.92% of our approved budget. Last year, we were at 58.51, so trending similar.
Oh, any questions on Fund 10? Yes, Ms. Kozlowski.
Just a quick question on the PCs that were purchased for eAchieve. Are these brand new?
This is more of, we have a service with Milwaukee PC because the students are spread out all over the state. The students will go to Milwaukee PC to get their equipment, and they maintain it for them too if there's any issues. I believe when the students get the equipment, it's new, but I would like to double check that because I'm not 100% sure of that. But I'm pretty sure they get new equipment to start with.
Okay, because my next question is do we have opportunity that you get a discount on returning, right? So if I get a new iPad or an iPhone, right, this is just Apple, that I can go in and I can get a discount by turning in and exchanging my old for the new. Just looking to see if we have any opportunity to kind of reduce costs on.
Let me talk to eAchieve about that process and get a little more information, and we can either send it out in a Friday update or bring it back next month.
Yeah, I believe if you extend that out, I believe that we sell our old equipment.
We do for our
And-
internal equipment. Yeah, eAchieve's a little different, but for the equipment that we're buying from Apple for ourselves, yes, that we in turn, when we turn it around, some students have the opportunity to purchase their old if it's at the end of its life cycle and if they're graduating, and there's other criteria. But otherwise, we do resell a lot of the old technology. Money back on that.
And one of the reasons, and I'm thinking back, Pat, you might have to help me with this, or Darren, I think one of the reasons why we went with, and Karen, you know this too, we went with Milwaukee PC is because they're located throughout the state, not just in one or two locations, and we really didn't want to take on the technical support and shipping all that equipment all over the state. From our perspective, that was a pretty big cost. You recall some of that, Pat?
Yeah, that's why we went with them, and they were cheaper than the other companies that we looked at, who weren't as widespread throughout the state. But the main reason is that we could have the students not have to travel very far if they needed service on the computer.
Right, it's their lifeline. I mean,
Yeah.
you know, when we know how important technology is, but, you know, working out of their homes and studying out of their homes, and, you know, we don't want to put that burden on our parents, right, to be the technical support team. So there were a number of factors of why we went with them, and yeah, just what's included in that whole fee, because there were other components to it. I just don't recall what all the components were. Any other questions or comments on Fund 10? Fund 27, at bat.
Okay.
I
Revenue.
know you're a Brewers fan.
I am a huge Brewer fan. Hence the wacky fingernails, because I went to a game last week and didn't get a chance to change them. But yes, I'm a Brewer fan. Revenue, our April special education revenue just included some grant payments from IDEA, which is our flow-through is $384,166, and for the IDEA preschool, $38,679. If you're just getting familiar with those grants, the IDEA flow-through is our larger of the two, and it can go for pretty much any special, well, there's limitations, but we can, there are minor limitations. We can spend it on just about anything we want, whereas the preschool has to be used only for preschool expenditures, and it's a much smaller amount every year. Let's see. So we also received some Medicaid reimbursements for a little over 42,000, and we've received 25% of our special education revenue compared to 25% last year. It's important to note that the majority of our special education money is a transfer from Fund 10 to cover the expenditures that haven't been covered by state and federal aid, and that doesn't happen until the very end of the year when we know how much we need to transfer. We budget a certain amount every year, but then we true it down in June to what we've actually spent and what we've received. But that will most likely be part of the budget amendments also if we need to, or the budget revisions, if we need to change that amount at all. If anything, for this year, I would foresee that we would be bringing that number down, not increasing that number. Expenditures, same thing with salary and benefits. It's definitely one of our top spends in special education, and we're where we expect to be with it. Purchase services, main spending was our special education tuition to the private schools that provide services that we need to have for some of our students. Non-capital objects, supplies, mainly supplies for special education, and most of that money is flow-through. Most of any of the other expenditures are paid for with our flow-through budget. Capital, no capital expenditures in April. Insurance, no insurance costs. No transfers yet. We've spent 66.39% of our special education budget compared to 70.01 at this time last year. Any questions on Fund 27? Okay, then the only other real thing, we took Fund 43 off last month because it was completely spent. Tax levy I've alluded to already where we're at with that. The other two documents in there were for our claims payable, the tracking of our health insurance claims, and the dental claims payable tracking. And both of those funds are very healthy right now. Dental, we're right about the same amount we started with at the beginning of the year. As far as how much we've used for claims versus what we've brought in the payments, the monthly expense for that. And for the health insurance, we've been talking about this for 2 years now, since the pandemic started, that we've been waiting for that, right? That's the shoe to drop, because people stopped going to see the doctor, so we kept building and building. And last year, we were able to keep our insurance premiums even for employees because we built a surplus. And we're looking at being able to do that again this year, because I don't know if people just aren't going back to the doctors or they stayed healthy, but we're just not seeing. We saw a little spike for a couple months and then it dropped back down again, and we have a very healthy surplus. So we're working on how we can utilize that. The big concern is that some of the money we will want to put into our overall fund balance. So in our fund balance, we have a reserved amount for claims, which is different than this balance, the month-to-month paycheck balance. And so we'd like to move some of that surplus into the reserves, the fund balance reserves, so that if you have a bad claims year, you've got that additional money out there. In order to do that, though, we have to reduce the expenditures when we move that out. And so it's going to make our health insurance expenditures look abnormally low when we make that change. But we'll be coming back with what we want to, how much we want to move when we see where we're at year end.
What's the timing of that?
The timing of that, we'll have to move it out at the end of June. Because at the end of June, so the way this works, there's a couple different liability counts. So when we have payroll takes out what we're supposed to be paying from the employee contribution. The employer contribution puts it in a separate liability account. And then each month we move it over into our overall health insurance liability account. That one is supposed to only have our IBNR in it at the end of June. And the IBNR is the incurred but not reported, so it's the claims that have been, people have gone to the doctor by June 30th, but the bills haven't come in yet. But in the other liability where it first lands, that can be what we anticipate we need to cover July and August. So we have to look at the right balance of what do we leave in that liability account, and then what excess of that gets transferred into our fund.
So it's essentially an accrual process that you're
Correct.
going through.
Correct.
I was planning on probably in July, I think we did it about 2 years ago, just having a agendized item for our health insurance program, and we went through kind of the flow of the cash and expenses to the liabilities and the bills being cut, but just so everyone has, because it's such a big line item, right? So I was picturing July maybe, or August, whenever, just kind of going over that again. And we can do it for dental, it's the same process for dental, just much smaller numbers, just so everyone has an understanding of how these liabilities and then our fund balance reserves and all that kind of come together.
And with dental, we can leave whatever amount we really want to into the liability account versus the health. We have to align it to our IBNR. So the dental is less worrisome about what, as long as we have enough in there, it's less worrisome.
Will you have that be inclusive enough to like stop loss insurance and, the whole, will you give us the whole picture there, or?
Yeah, we
or
could,
just
maybe H&I or consultants could help us put a slide deck together about how we don't have.
Because there's more details to it than just.
Yeah, I mean, there's
the
the
few
whole
things that you're
side of
talking
how do
about.
we get to what people would consider a premium. We call them funding rates because we're not getting a bill from an insurance company for premiums. We get bills for claims. So there's that whole side of the utilization of health insurance and setting up the premiums. But then what I was talking about, we can expand it, is now that we have that funding rate for each individual, what's the flow of that cash? And it goes into a liability account until the claims come in, then it comes out and it gets expensed out. And talk about reserves and all of that, because there's advantage. I mean, I think it's good we're self-funded, but it's more complicated than just getting a bill with premiums on it,
Dr. Piazza.
Thank you. I think considering something in terms of a stop-loss perspective would be very important, because what we're anticipating or seeing in healthcare is that we have more severe problems because people are avoiding or waiting. And then also, I don't know what kind of cost guarantee or protection we have, but I would also expect that service rates would be going up.
I would think. But we can bring, I think it's a good report. I mean, we're doing it anyways, but I think it's timely. Especially now that we think we're coming out of being able to use COVID as an excuse for everything, hopefully. But a full report, just so you're comfortable with what we're doing and how we're doing it.
And that's why we are looking to put more money into the fund balances in anticipation of some rockier years ahead, and then we've got that money to utilize later on. But also, every year, this was first started last year, a requirement was put into place that we get an actuarial company to do an attestation on the health of our health insurance, our self-funded policy. And so we partnered with Key Benefits Concepts, and so every year we provide them the information of all of our health insurance and dental insurance, and they do a review to say, yes, we're healthy, we're in good shape, or if we ever got to the point where we weren't, they would be required to document and share that we were not in good shape. But
Keep in mind, in terms of the reserves, we agreed to use $750,000 if needed. If we don't have the claims, we don't have the expense, right? To have no increase in our funding rates, because our reserves were getting to be so strong that there could have been questions raised, I guess. So that was part of our flat premium renewal for next year, so.
So effectively, we absorb it.
If the claims come in, yeah.
That's what you're saying, though, right? So we didn't pass the risk on to our employees. We assumed it. So it's no different than any other business, that every time you go up from an insurance renewal where you are not self-funded, you determine, here's what my risk ratio is for the group of employees that I have, and then it's the delta of how much do I pass on to the employee versus how much does the employer keep. So effectively what we did this year, and I want to be clear on that, is we absorbed it, so that is an additional expense. We just didn't choose to pass that on. But I want to piggyback on Dr. Piasek's piece too, is the risk of being self-funded, and especially at this point where we're not seeing the utilization, you have to figure out where that is. So if I reduce the utilization and reduce the reserve, right, which is essentially going to be a favorable impact somewhere within my funds, it also can hurt our rates going forward if the utilization all of a sudden spikes. And that balance and being able to measure that is tricky, right, far more than I think we want to address today. I get that, but I do think that the discussion that you're mentioning is very warranted.
And one other thing with those reserves is 12% of that is paid by the employees. They're parted, so they have a slice in that as well. Just so you know that-
17% if they're not on the wellness program.
Correct. But yeah, it's a big topic. I mean, we could spend an hour on it easily.
And there are DPI regulations on what we can do with excess, so it's not like we can say, oh, field day, we're going to put it in to the rest of our Fund 10 and offset any budget. It's got to stay either in the health or be returned back to employees. So our way of returning it back to employees is by keeping the insurance consistent and not increasing the rates.
Well, we'll look forward to revisiting and that information. I think it is time. It's good timing. Yep, excellent. Any other questions on where we're at with the budget? Okay, thank you.
Welcome.
Moving on to our budget development process for the 2022-2023. We pretty much have been following the same schedule for many years. Are there any highlights that you want to talk about?
No, I thought with the new committee members and 3 new board members in total that we would just hit on what's left in our budget building calendar. We're into May, and according to this, we're talking about employee compensation, whether it's benefits or salaries, and that's what we've been doing. So we're on pace for that. In July, we'll actually formally set the budget hearing date, which is, if we keep to what we've done historically, it'll be September 14th. But we will be presenting a preliminary budget to you that you will adopt, and then that goes to the budget hearing in September. But we don't finalize everything until October, the end of October, actually. It's strange. It will be several months into our fiscal year, but that's the way government works. The biggest date...
Not city. City gets a calendar year.
Some governments work. Just government in terms of oddity.
County gets a calendar year.
The biggest date coming up fiscally, and we talk about enrollment all the time, but is the third Friday count in September. So if we reference third Friday, that's what we mean. And then we'll talk on the 10th and 12th about a very near final budget. And what we'll have at that point is the expenditures will be in place, but we won't know our state aid, so we can't set the levy yet. So on October 15th, we'll get our certified aid. On the 1st of October, we get our property valuation. The 15th, we get our general aid and voucher program, that's a more of a fluid thing, but now. But once we get the aid on the 15th, I can come back to you on the 24th with a finalized tax levy for you to approve at a special board meeting on October 24th. So that's what's ahead of us, but I thought it'd be good just to spend just a couple of minutes going over that so you know, even though we present something at the budget hearing, you're not tied to that necessarily. Now you've issued contracts, you've locked into a lot of things by then, expense-wise. But it won't, I can tell you it won't be what's presented. It'll be very close to that in the end. But so that's what's ahead of us, and if you have questions on that, feel free to reach out to me on process.
Any questions now? All right, thank you, Darren. Appreciate it. Always looking forward to it. We work on it year-round, so. Moving on to our ESSER funding, you have an update for us.
Yeah, this is just, again, kind of a heads up, because we have new board members and everything. But this is the age trial, I call it the age trial balance, of what we've we, as in the board, has authorized for the usage of ESSER 2 and ESSER 3 funds. ESSER 1, as Sherry mentioned, was fully expended. That was our initial response to COVID. So the status is in the middle, the status column. The board has formally authorized the items that are in green there, but then the second year of that package that was presented to T&L, you said that you were fine with it, but you wanted to be able to take final action on it, so I labeled that assigned right now, just so you know. That we've kind of booked it as a potential expense, but we haven't authorized any purchase orders or anything of that nature. So as T&L, and it depends on the topic that's being talked about, I have a comment on HVAC in my executive summary. We'll update that as the board takes formal actions to keep you aware. And then the final total of what's still available is in the lower right-hand corner. And then under each ESSER, there's the date range there. That's our date range of when the funds need to be expended by. So for ESSER 2, we have until September of 23, and then for ESSER 3, it's September of 2024. So I don't think this has changed much from last month. Maybe we added the column, but the board hasn't taken any action. But again, I think I plan on throwing this on every F&F agenda just so everyone's clear as to where we are. And then I'll be putting this, or some version of this. We have an ESSER web page too, because there's obviously some community interest in the amount of dollars involved. So then on the HVAC, we had talked, it's interesting, HVAC was a huge topic a summer ago, and then with COVID, then it's not. But if we do want to do HVAC, and it's not a must-have, I think it's a topic we should consider, I won't deny that. But the lead time on equipment, if we think we want to do work next summer, the summer of 2023, I'd like to have some sort of nod by, say, July, so we can get on with the design work to get an RFP out in September or October, preferably September, to be able to secure the equipment being able to be installed by in August of 2023. Because some equipment's pretty standard, but some of our equipment's not. And I don't know what the supply chain situation on some of that equipment's going to be. So it's something to keep in mind. But we just want to know whether this should be on our table of to-dos or not. So we can bring HVAC. I have, if you're ever wondering what I'm thinking in terms of agenda items, I have a list of summer reports to F&F, and one of those is an update on HVAC. If you remember, the last few dollars of referendum dollars was duct cleaning and balancing, and we're nearing the end of all of that. We're nearing the end of upgrading the equipment that can take MERV 13 filtration is almost done. But also I want the leadership team that's in place and has been in place of the service building just to come in and kind of introduce themselves to you as well. So if that all gets rolled into an HVAC funding conversation, I think that's great. But I wanted you to know what we were thinking in terms of timeline.
Dr. Piasek.
Thank you. I know the last presentation, it was more comprehensive that you gave on HVAC and the different options and the total cost. When it comes back, it would help a lot if we can prioritize what some of those need. You know, there are some that were well outside of their service life. So if we could come in with some sense of administrative priority, I think that would help in trying to understand what needs to happen first.
Okay. Yeah, bring back a report on that, or an update.
And we've had some formal analysis of our equipment, so that could be shared also, maybe in a summary format.
Yeah.
I mean, I know it's gotten very detailed at times.
No, I'll put, that's the nice thing about board docs, is I can put those studies in here for you to peruse at your nature. We don't have to pay, I mean, we can read it to you, but we did it, we had the engineers come in last August. Does that seem right? I'm losing track now. And do a complete analysis of our HVAC equipment, a full inventory, when they were put in. So a lot of useful information. So we'll bring back a report to you to help foster a conversation.
Any other questions or comments on ESSER?
Oh, one other thing on ESSER, we found out we got $4,000 more in ESSER funding just the other day. So if the numbers do change slightly, it's still a living thing to a certain degree.
A pleasant bonus?
I'm not sure of the rules that came with it, but it's $4,000. Hopefully it doesn't cost us 10.
I'm glad you qualified that.
Yeah.
All right. Anyone else? Okay, thank you. Moving on to our other business, any recommendations for items to be agendized at future meetings? We had a couple kind of bubble up tonight.
Yeah, and on the health insurance front also, I'm planning on having Pro Health Care come in after we have 6 months of data on the employee
clinics?
clinic. In probably a month or two to develop a report, so that might be coming early, either late summer or early fall.
All right, fair enough. Well, this ends the open portion of our meeting. We do have a need, though, to adjourn into executive session, so I would be looking for a motion to do that. Dr. Piasek?
I would move to adjourn to executive session pursuant to Wisconsin statute 19.85 parentheses 1 parentheses E for deliberating or negotiating the purchasing of public properties, the investing of public funds, or conducting other specified public business whenever competitive or bargaining reasons require closed session. Student transportation and food service provider contract, potential sale of district property.
Is there a second to that motion?
Second.
Second by Mr. McCaffrey. This is a roll call vote.
Ms. Ranchik?
Aye.
Mrs. Piacic?
Aye.
Mr. Como?
Aye.
Mr. McCaffrey?
Aye.
And Carrie, Mrs. Kozlowski. 5-0. I don't have a sheet in front of me, so I'm winging it here.
All right. Passes 5-0. Do we need a 5-minute break, or should we just roll right in? Roll right in? Okay. Thank you, everyone. Have a good night.